My name is Isabella Rodriguez, and I'm 26 years old. The moment my family called me a nobody at my brother's college graduation was supposed to crush me. Instead, it became the setup for the most satisfying 30 seconds of my entire life. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in less than 10 minutes, the principal would be announcing my name in front of 8,000 people for an achievement so significant that it would make their cruel words echo back at them like a slap across the face. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how that moment felt so perfectly poetic, you need to know about the 24 years that led up to it. 24 years of being the family afterthought, the one who never quite measured up, the daughter who somehow always fell short despite trying twice as hard as everyone else. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, in a sprawling ranch-style house in Scottsdale that my parents bought when my father's accounting firm finally took off. From the outside, we looked like any successful middle-class family. My father, Miguel Rodriguez, had built his practice from nothing, working 18-hour days to establish himself as one of the most trusted CPAs in the area. My mother, Carmen, managed the administrative side of his business while somehow also maintaining a picture-perfect home that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Then there was my brother Diego and me. Diego was 2 years older, and from the moment he could walk, it was obvious he was destined for greatness in my parents' eyes. He was everything they valued: charismatic, athletic, academically gifted, without having to try too hard, and possessed of that effortless confidence that made teachers and coaches and neighbors all comment on what a special young man he was. I was none of those things. Where Diego was outgoing, I was reserved. Where he excelled at sports, I preferred books. Where he could charm his way out of trouble with a smile, I was serious and literal, the kind of child who followed rules because I believed they mattered. These differences might have been simply complementary in another family, but in ours, they became the foundation for a hierarchy that would define my entire childhood. The favoritism wasn't malicious, at least. I don't think my parents intended it that way. It was more like they had a spotlight of attention and approval, and that spotlight naturally followed Diego wherever he went. When he scored the winning goal in his soccer championship, the whole family drove 3 hours to watch. When I won the regional science fair 2 weeks later, my mother said, "That's nice, honey," and asked if I could help her fold laundry. By the time I was 10, I had learned not to expect much fanfare for my achievements. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me. I never doubted that they did. But their love felt different, quieter, like background music compared to the symphony of praise that surrounded Diego's every accomplishment. High school crystallized these patterns in ways that were sometimes subtle and sometimes painfully obvious. Diego was student body president, captain of the varsity soccer team, and somehow managed to maintain a 3.8 GPA while dating the most popular girl in his class. I was valedictorian with a perfect 4.0, editor of the school newspaper, captain of the debate team, and completely invisible to boys my age. When college application time came, the differences in our treatment became impossible to ignore. My parents hired a private college counselor for Diego, someone who charged $200 an hour to help him craft the perfect applications for the Ivy League schools he was targeting. For me, they handed me a stack of state school brochures and told me I was smart enough to figure it out on my own. Diego got into Columbia University with a partial academic scholarship. I got into Arizona State with a full academic scholarship, plus acceptance to their prestigious honors program. My parents' reaction to these news items was telling. Diego's acceptance warranted a celebration dinner at the fanciest restaurant in Scottsdale, complete with extended family members driving in from Tucson to congratulate him. My acceptance letter was acknowledged with a nod and a comment. About how practical it was that I'd be staying close to home. College became my escape from the constant comparisons, but it also amplified my determination to prove myself. While Diego enjoyed the quintessential college experience at Columbia, joining a fraternity, studying abroad in Spain, networking with the children of diplomats and CEOs, I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that worried my professors. Double majored in computer science and mathematics, graduated summa cum laude in 3 years instead of 4, and was accepted into graduate programs at MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon. But perhaps more importantly, during my junior year, I had started working on something that would change everything. A software algorithm that could predict and prevent cybersecurity breaches before they happened. What began as a class project evolved into something much bigger when my computer science professor, Dr. Amanda Peterson, recognized the commercial potential of what I had created. She helped me refine the algorithm and eventually introduced me to her former colleague at the Department of Homeland Security. Within 6 months, the federal government had classified my work and offered me a position that I couldn't talk about with anyone, including my family, for 2 years after graduation. While Diego was working his way up at a prestigious investment firm in Manhattan and sending home photos of himself at glamorous work events, I was living quietly in a suburb of Washington, D.C., doing work that I couldn't describe beyond saying. I was in tech. My parents assumed I had some boring government job analyzing data. They weren't entirely wrong, but they had no idea that the data I was analyzing was helping to protect critical infrastructure from foreign cyber attacks, or that the algorithm I had developed was being hailed as revolutionary within the cybersecurity community. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my family celebrated Diego's visible successes, his promotion to associate at his firm, his engagement to a lawyer named Patricia, whom my mother adored, his beautiful apartment overlooking Central Park, I was quietly becoming exactly the kind of person they claimed to value: successful, financially secure, and making a real difference in the world. The difference was that my success was classified, invisible to them, and therefore, in their minds, non-existent. When Diego announced that he was graduating from Columbia's executive MBA program, my parents immediately began planning their trip to New York. The graduation ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in May, and they talked about it for months in advance, treating it like the social event of the year. My mother bought a new dress. My father took time off work, something he rarely did. They booked a hotel room at the plaza and made dinner reservations at Diego's favorite restaurant. I was expected to attend, of course, not as a celebration of my own achievements, but as a supporting player in Diego's moment of triumph. The assumption was that I would be appropriately impressed by his accomplishment, suitably proud to be his sister, and grateful to be included in the family celebration of his latest success. What none of them knew was that I had my own connection to Columbia University, one that had been developing quietly over the past several months. What none of them knew was that my algorithm had caught the attention of people far beyond the Department of Homeland Security. What none of them knew was that on the same day as Diego's graduation, I would be receiving recognition that would fundamentally change how they saw me and how I saw myself. But that revelation was still days away. For now I was still just Isabella, the quiet daughter, the one who had done well enough but never quite sparkled the way Diego did. The one who would dutifully applaud her brother's achievement while remaining, in their eyes, exactly what they had always seen me as: a nobody who had found her place in the shadows of someone else's spotlight. The patterns that would define my relationship with my family didn't emerge overnight. They crystallized slowly, like sediment settling in still water, layer by layer, until they formed an unshakable foundation of expectations and roles that everyone accepted as natural law. My earliest memory of feeling different was during my 5th birthday party. My mother had planned what she called a princess party in our backyard. complete with pink decorations and a tiara-shaped cake. But instead of playing with the other little girls who were running around in their frilly dresses, I was sitting, cross-legged on the patio, completely absorbed in taking apart the electronic singing card my grandmother had given me. I wanted to understand how the tiny speaker worked, how pressing the button made music come out of something so thin. When my mother found me 20 minutes later, surrounded by the card's components, she was mortified. "Isabella, what have you done? That was a beautiful card from Abuela." She quickly ushered me inside to wash my hands, muttering about how I was such a peculiar child, and wondering aloud where I got these strange interests. 2 years later, at Diego's 7th birthday party, he spent the entire afternoon performing soccer tricks for our relatives, demonstrating his ability to juggle the ball on his knees, his feet, even his head. The adults formed a circle around him, clapping and cheering with each successful trick. My father recorded every moment on his video camera, providing running commentary about Diego's natural athletic ability and incredible coordination. When Diego finally finished his performance, sweaty and grinning from ear to ear, my Uncle Carlos lifted him onto his shoulders and declared him the next Pell. The entire family burst into applause. My mother's eyes shone with pride as she served him an extra-large piece of cake, telling everyone within earshot about the soccer coach who had already approached them about putting Diego on a competitive team. The contrast wasn't lost on me, even at 5 years old. When I did something unusual, it was concerning. When Diego did something impressive, it was celebrated. The message was clear. His talents were valuable. Mine were confusing. School became my refuge because it was the one place where my particular kind of intelligence was recognized and rewarded. While Diego struggled with reading comprehension and needed a tutor to help him with basic math, I was reading chapter books by 1st grade and solving algebra problems by 3rd grade. My teachers consistently ranked me at the top of the class, but these achievements seemed to puzzle my parents more than please them. "She's so serious," my mother would tell her friends when they asked about my academic performance. "Sometimes I worry she doesn't know how to just be a kid." Meanwhile, Diego's C+ in science was met with encouragement and promises of ice cream if he could bring it up to a B-. The summer I turned 9, my parents enrolled both of us in camps that they thought would suit our personalities. Diego went to soccer camp, where he spent 3 weeks perfecting his skills and making friends who would invite him to birthday parties for years to come. I was sent to what my mother euphemistically called social skills camp, essentially a program designed to help shy children learn to interact more comfortably with their peers. I hated every minute of it. The counselors treated introversion like a character flaw that needed to be fixed. They forced us to participate in group activities and gave out prizes for most improved social butterfly of the day. When I tried to explain that I actually enjoyed reading during quiet time instead of chatting with the other campers, I was told I was missing opportunities to make friends. The final straw came during the camp's talent show. While other kids performed songs or told jokes, I had prepared a presentation about constellations, complete with hand-drawn star charts and explanations of how ancient navigators used the night sky to find their way across oceans. I thought it was fascinating. The audience of parents and counselors politely applauded, but I could see the confused glances they exchanged. One mother actually whispered to another, loud enough for me to hear, that poor child needs to learn to relate to kids her own age. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When my parents picked me up that day, the camp director pulled them aside for a private conversation. Through the office window, I watched my mother's expression grow increasingly concerned as the director spoke animatedly, gesturing toward pamphlets spread across her desk. I couldn't hear the words, but I could guess the content. Their daughter was too analytical, too solitary, too focused on abstract concepts instead of social connections. That evening at dinner, my parents announced that they had decided I would benefit from spending more time with Diego and his friends, learning to be more well-rounded. From then on, whenever Diego had friends over, I was expected to join their activities instead of retreating to my room with a book. The arrangement was uncomfortable for everyone involved. Diego's friends didn't know what to make of his serious little sister, and I felt like an anthropologist studying an alien culture. The financial disparities became more apparent as we got older. When Diego expressed interest in joining a travel soccer team that required expensive equipment and tournament fees, my parents immediately rearranged the family budget to accommodate the costs. They bought him professional-grade cleats, custom jerseys, and drove him to games in cities hundreds of miles away. When I asked if I could attend a summer program for gifted students at Arizona State University, my mother's first question was about the cost. The program fee was actually less than Diego's soccer expenses, but the conversation felt different. There was hesitation, negotiation, a suggestion that maybe I could find something more practical to do with my summer. Eventually, they agreed to let me attend, but only after I promised to help my mother with filing at my father's office to earn part of the money. These moments taught me that my interests weren't just different, they were less valuable. Diego's athletic pursuits were investments in his future, worthy of sacrifice and celebration. My academic interests were hobbies that I was expected to pursue independently, without creating a burden on the family's resources or attention. Middle school brought new challenges and new evidence of our different standing in the family hierarchy. Diego became popular almost immediately, his natural charisma and athletic ability making him a sought-after friend and teammate. He started dating a girl named Ashley, whose wealthy parents invited our family to their country club for dinner. I watched my parents beam with pride as they socialized with Ashley's family, discussing vacation homes and investment strategies while Diego and Ashley held hands by the pool. Meanwhile, I was selected for the state mathematics competition, an honor that required months of preparation and represented the highest academic achievement available to students my age. When I told my parents about the selection, my father nodded approvingly and said it was very nice, then immediately turned the conversation to Diego's upcoming homecoming dance and whether they should hire a professional photographer to capture the moment. The mathematics competition was held on a Saturday in Tucson, requiring an early morning drive and an entire day of testing. My mother dropped me off at the competition site with a pack of granola bars and instructions to call when I was finished. She had planned to spend the day shopping with her sister, who lived nearby. When I placed third in the state out of over 200 participants, I called to share the news. "That's wonderful, honey," she said, her voice slightly distracted. "I'll pick you up in an hour. Your aunt and I are still at the mall." That same month, Diego scored the winning goal in his school's championship game. My parents not only attended the game but also hosted a celebration party afterward, inviting neighbors, extended family, and Diego's teammates. They hired a caterer and decorated the house with congratulatory banners. The local newspaper even sent a photographer to document the celebration. These experiences taught me that achievement alone wasn't enough. It had to be the right kind of achievement, the kind that made sense to my parents and fit their vision of success. Diego's accomplishments were visible, social, and easily understood. Mine were abstract, individual, and apparently less worthy of recognition. But perhaps the most telling incident occurred during my 8th grade graduation ceremony. I was receiving multiple awards: highest academic achievement, outstanding student in mathematics, and the Principal's Award for exemplary character. As my name was called for the 3rd time, I heard my mother whisper to the woman sitting next to her, "I don't know where she gets it from. She's so different from the rest of us." The comment wasn't meant to be cruel, but it revealed something fundamental about how my family saw me, as an outsider, someone whose gifts were foreign, and inexplicable rather than sources of pride. I was different, and in my family's worldview, different meant lesser. As I sat on that stage, holding my awards and looking out at my parents' politely confused faces, I made a decision that would shape the next decade of my life if they couldn't understand the value of what I was good at. I would simply have to become so undeniably successful that understanding would be irrelevant. I would achieve something so significant that even they would have no choice but to recognize its worth. I just had no idea then how literally that prediction would come true. High school marked the beginning of what I now recognize as the most defining 4 years of my adolescence. Not because of typical teenage experiences like prom or first relationships, but because it was during those years that the gap between Diego's life and mine widened into a chasm, so vast that even strangers could see it. Diego entered Phoenix Preparatory Academy as a freshman with the kind of confidence that made upperclassmen notice him immediately. Within his first month, he had been recruited for both the varsity soccer team and the student government. By October, he was dating a junior named Rebecca, who came from one of Scottsdale's most prominent families. Her father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across Arizona. I entered the same school 2 years later with my head down and a schedule packed with advanced placement courses, where Diego navigated the social hierarchies with intuitive ease. I found myself studying the unwritten rules like they were equations I needed to solve. The other students weren't cruel to me, but they weren't particularly interested either. I was the girl who always had the homework done, who could explain calculus problems, and who ate lunch in the library because it was quieter than the cafeteria. The contrast in our social standing became painfully obvious during Diego's junior year, which coincided with my freshman year. Rebecca's family threw an elaborate Sweet 16 party at the Arizona Biltmore Resort, and our entire family was invited. My parents spent weeks preparing for the event. My mother bought herself a new cocktail dress and took Diego shopping for his first real suit. My father practiced small talk about golf and investments, topics he thought would help him connect with Rebecca's father. The party was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The ballroom was decorated with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers. A live band played while teenagers in designer gowns and expensive suits danced on a marble floor. My parents mingled confidently with the other adults, discussing vacation homes in Sedona and ski trips to Aspen. Diego moved through the crowd like he belonged there, introducing Rebecca to relatives and posing for professional photographs. Spent most of the evening sitting at a corner table, watching the spectacle and feeling like an anthropologist observing a foreign culture. When one of Rebecca's friends approached me and asked if I was Diego's little sister, I nodded, and she smiled politely before moving on to someone more interesting. That interaction or lack thereof summarized my entire high school social experience. But while Diego was building his reputation as the charming athlete who could navigate any social situation, I was discovering something far more valuable: teachers who recognized and nurtured intellectual curiosity. My AP chemistry teacher, Mrs. Sarah Brennan, became the first adult outside of my grandmother who seemed genuinely excited about my potential. Mrs. Brennan was in her early 40s, with graying hair that she wore in a practical ponytail and an infectious enthusiasm for molecular structures that made even the most reluctant students pay attention. She had earned her PhD in chemical engineering from Stanford, but chose to teach high school because, as she often said, this is where real curiosity either flourishes or dies. During my sophomore year, Mrs. Brennan noticed that I was finishing lab assignments faster than the rest of the class, not because I was rushing, but because I understood the underlying principles intuitively. Instead of giving me busy work, she started providing me with additional challenges, complex problems that required research beyond our textbook. "Isabella," she said one afternoon as I was cleaning up after a particularly intricate experiment involving polymer synthesis, "have You ever considered that chemistry might be more than just a subject you're good at? It might be your calling. The word calling struck me as both foreign and thrilling. No one had ever suggested that my academic interests could be anything more than useful skills for getting into college. Mrs. Brennan spoke about science. The way my parents talked about Diego's athletic career as if it had the potential to define and transform a life. Under her guidance, I started participating in regional science competitions, events that required months of preparation and independent research. My first competition was on environmental chemistry, and I spent weeks analyzing water samples from various sources around Phoenix, documenting pollution levels and their potential health impacts. When I placed second in the regional competition, Mrs. Brennan was more excited than I was. "This is just the beginning," she told me, her eyes bright with possibility. "With results like this, you could compete at the national level. You could earn scholarship opportunities that would take you anywhere you want to go." Meanwhile, Diego's junior year was proceeding exactly as everyone expected. He was elected student body vice president, led the soccer team to their first state championship in 15 years, and maintained a 3.7 GPA that my parents considered exceptionally impressive given his extracurricular commitments. College recruiters started visiting our house, and my parents would spend hours discussing Diego's options over dinner. The University of Arizona is offering a partial athletic scholarship, my father would say, spreading recruiting letters across the dining room table. But Columbia's academic reputation might be worth the extra cost. What about Stanford? My mother would add. Rebecca's cousin went there, and she said the networking opportunities are incredible. These conversations would continue for hours, with my parents analyzing every aspect of Diego's future. Which programs would best position him for success? Which connections would be most valuable? Which geographic locations would provide the optimal combination of prestige and opportunity? When I tried to contribute information about my own college research universities with strong chemistry programs, scholarship opportunities for science students, internship programs at national laboratories, the conversation would shift politely but definitely back to Diego's prospects. My academic achievements were acknowledged but not celebrated, noted but not analyzed for their potential to transform my future. The disparity became most obvious during our respective junior years. Diego's college application process was treated like a family project. My parents hired Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a private college counselor who charged $300 per session to help craft Diego's applications. Dr. Walsh spent months working with Diego on his personal essays, helping him articulate his leadership experiences and athletic achievements in compelling narratives. She also coordinated his interview preparation, arranging practice sessions with alumni from his target schools and coaching him on how to present himself as the ideal candidate. When Diego needed to take the SAT a second time to improve his scores, my parents paid for a private tutor who met with him twice a week for 3 months. My college application process was notably different. When I asked about working with Dr. Walsh, my mother suggested that I was smart enough to handle the applications on my own. When I mentioned that I wanted to retake the SAT to improve my already high scores, my father questioned whether the registration fee was really necessary since my scores were already good enough. I researched universities, wrote application essays, and prepared for interviews without professional guidance, relying instead on Mrs. Brennan's advice and online resources. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was applying to more competitive programs than Diego. Top-tier chemistry and engineering departments that accepted fewer than 10% of applicants, while receiving a fraction of the support. But Mrs. Brennan more than compensated for my family's lack of investment in my future. She spent her own time helping me research scholarship opportunities, writing recommendation letters that highlighted not just my academic performance, but my potential for groundbreaking research. She connected me with professors at Arizona State, University who were conducting cutting-edge work in computational chemistry. Isabella has the kind of analytical mind that could reshape our understanding of molecular interactions. She wrote in one recommendation letter, which she shared with me years later. She doesn't just solve problems, she identifies problems that others haven't recognized yet. During the spring of my junior year, Mrs. Brennan encouraged me to apply for a summer research internship at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. The program was designed for exceptional high school students interested in scientific careers, and acceptance was extraordinarily competitive. Only 30 students nationwide were selected each year. When I told my parents about the opportunity, their reaction was lukewarm. New Mexico is quite far away, my mother said, frowning. And it's an entire summer. Don't you think you'd be better off staying here and maybe getting a job? You could work at your father's office and start saving money for college. This internship could lead to scholarship opportunities, I explained. And it's at one of the most prestigious research facilities in the country. My father looked up from his newspaper with mild interest. That's nice, honey. But practical work experience is valuable too. Learning office management skills could be useful no matter what career you choose. I didn't argue further, but I submitted the application anyway, with Mrs. Brennan's enthusiastic support. When the acceptance letter arrived in April, I was too shocked to immediately process what it meant. I had been selected for one of the most competitive scientific programs in the country. An opportunity that could fundamentally change my trajectory. Mrs. Brennan was ecstatic. Isabella, this is extraordinary, she said when I brought the letter to show her. Los Alamos doesn't accept students who aren't destined for remarkable careers. This is proof that you have the potential to contribute to scientific knowledge at the highest levels. That evening at dinner, I announced my acceptance to the Los Alamos program with careful excitement, hoping that this achievement might finally earn the kind of recognition my family typically reserved for Diego's accomplishments. My mother smiled politely. That's wonderful, dear. How long is the program again? 10 weeks, I replied, from June through August. Oh, she said, her expression shifting to concern. But Diego's engagement party is in July. Rebecca's family is planning something quite elaborate, and we were hoping you could help with some of the preparations. The assumption that I would prioritize party planning over a once-in-a-lifetime research opportunity revealed everything I needed to know about how my family valued my future. At that moment, I realized that no achievement would ever be significant enough to shift their perspective. Their vision of my role was fixed, and it would take something truly extraordinary to crack that foundation. The breaking point arrived on a humid Thursday evening in June, 3 days before I was scheduled to leave for the Los Alamos internship. What should have been a quiet family dinner before my departure became the moment when years of subtle dismissal crystallized into words so cruel that they would echo in my mind for years to come. Diego had returned home from his freshman year at Columbia the week prior, and the house had been buzzing with celebration ever since. He brought home stories of fraternity parties, internship opportunities at Goldman Sachs, and weekend trips to the Hamptons with Rebecca, who was spending her summer working at her father's corporate headquarters in Manhattan. My parents hung on every word, asking detailed questions about his professors, his social life, and his plans for the following year. The dinner that night was meant to be a celebration for both of us. Diego's successful completion of his first year at Columbia and my acceptance to the Los Alamos program. My mother had prepared my favorite meal, her signature chicken mole, and my father had even brought home a bottle of champagne, though he rarely drank during the week. We should toast both of our accomplished children, he announced as we sat down to eat, pouring small glasses of champagne for everyone except me. At 17, I was still expected to drink sparkling cider while Diego, barely 19, was included in the adult ritual. The toast began predictably enough. To Diego, for his outstanding first year at Columbia and for representing our family with such distinction. We all raised our glasses, and Diego smiled that confident smile that had been charming people since he was 5 years old. And to Isabella, my father continued, though his tone shifted slightly, becoming more perfunctory, for her summer program. We're sure you'll learn a lot. The difference was subtle but unmistakable. Diego's achievements warranted detailed recognition, outstanding first year, representing the family with distinction. Mine merited generic encouragement, you'll learn a lot. But I was accustomed to these inequalities by then, and I chose to focus on the positive. At least my internship was being acknowledged at all. The conversation during dinner followed its usual pattern. Diego dominated with stories from Columbia, describing his economics professors and the networking events his fraternity had organized with alumni working on Wall Street. My parents asked follow-up questions, expressed amazement at the opportunities available to him, and speculated about how these connections might benefit his future career. When there was finally a lull in the Diego admiration session, I tried to share some information about the research I would be conducting at Los Alamos. The project I've been assigned involves developing new computational models for predicting molecular behavior. I began, excited to finally discuss work that genuinely fascinated me. If successful, it could have applications in everything from drug development to materials science. My mother nodded politely but didn't ask any follow-up questions. My father looked interested for approximately 30 seconds before turning back to Diego with a question about his fall semester course load. That's when Diego's phone rang. Rebecca was calling from New York, and my parents encouraged him to answer, eager to hear updates from their favorite almost daughter-in-law. Diego put the call on speaker so we could all participate in the conversation. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez. Rebecca's voice filled the dining room, bright and enthusiastic. I hope I'm not interrupting dinner. Never, sweetheart, my mother replied warmly. We always love hearing from you. Rebecca launched into an animated description of her internship at her father's company, where she was learning about automotive sales strategies and meeting with potential clients. I'm basically getting a master class in business development, she explained. Daddy says I'm a natural at reading people and understanding what motivates them to make purchasing decisions. My parents were completely captivated, asking detailed questions about her responsibilities and expressing amazement at her business acumen. You and Diego make such a power couple, my mother gushed. Both of you are going to do such important things in the world. Then Rebecca asked about our family news, and Diego mentioned my internship. Isabella is going to some science camp in New Mexico for the summer, he said casually, as if Los Alamos National Laboratory was equivalent to a recreational day camp. Oh, that's nice, Rebecca replied with the kind of polite disinterest reserved for distant relatives' minor achievements. Is it like a gifted and talented program or something? Before I could correct the mischaracterization, my father jumped in with what he apparently considered helpful clarification. It's a research program at a government facility. Isabella's always been good with numbers and science projects, so we thought it might be a nice way for her to spend the summer instead of just sitting around reading books. The casual dismissal of the most competitive scientific program in the country as a way to keep me busy hit me like a physical blow. But worse was coming. That's so sweet that you're encouraging her hobbies, Rebecca continued, her tone now patronizing in a way that made my stomach clench. It's important for young people to explore their interests, even if they're not planning to make careers out of them. My mother laughed at this comment. Exactly. We've always encouraged both of our children to pursue their passions. Diego's passion just happens to align with practical career paths, while Isabella's is more academic. The word academic was delivered with the same tone someone might use to describe a communicable disease. Well, Rebecca continued, apparently emboldened by my mother's response. Diego tells me Isabella is really smart, So I'm sure she'll figure out something practical to do with her life eventually. Maybe teaching? I hear there's always a demand for science teachers. My father nodded sagely. Teaching would be perfect for Isabella. She could have a stable job, good benefits, and still pursue her scientific interests as hobbies. Very practical. I sat there in stunned silence as the three adults in my life, my parents and my brother's girlfriend, discussed my future as if I were an interesting but limited pet whose potential needed to be managed rather than unleashed. The Los Alamos internship, which represented validation from some of the most brilliant scientists in the world, had been reduced to a science camp that might help me become a more qualified high school teacher. But the final blow came when Diego, apparently sensing my discomfort, tried to be supportive in the most devastating way possible. "Come on, guys," he said with the casual confidence of someone who had never doubted his own worth. "Give Isabella some credit. She might not be planning to conquer Wall Street like some of us, but she's really good at her science stuff. She could probably get into graduate school somewhere decent and maybe work for a pharmaceutical company or something. Not everyone needs to be a big shot." The phrase "not everyone needs to be a big shot" landed like a slap across my face. Diego meant it kindly in his mind. He was defending me against unrealistic expectations. But what I heard was the final confirmation that my family's vision of my potential was fundamentally limited. I was the smart one who would have a nice, quiet, unremarkable career doing work that mattered to no one except me. Rebecca's voice brought me back to the conversation. "Exactly, and Isabella seems like such a sweet, quiet girl. She'd probably be much happier with a simple life than dealing with all the pressure and competition that comes with really ambitious careers." My mother beamed as if Rebecca had delivered the highest possible compliment. "You understand Isabella perfectly, sweetheart. She's never been comfortable with attention or competition. She prefers to work behind the scenes." The assumption that I preferred obscurity because I was inherently incapable of greatness was the final straw. I had spent years accepting their limited expectations, telling myself that their lack of faith in my potential didn't matter as long as I continued to achieve academic success. But sitting there, listening to them plan my mediocre future while celebrating Diego's limitless possibilities, something fundamental shifted inside me. I stood up from the table, so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the tile floor. All conversation stopped, and 4 pairs of eyes turned to look at me with various expressions of surprise. "Excuse me," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside me. "I need to finish packing for my science camp." The sarcasm in my voice was subtle enough that I could maintain plausible deniability, but sharp enough that anyone really listening would catch it. My father frowned slightly, perhaps sensing that something was wrong, but unable to identify exactly what. "Isabella, we're having a family conversation," my mother said gently. "Rebecca was just sharing some lovely thoughts about your future." I looked around the table at their expectant faces, Rebecca's patronizing smile beaming through the phone screen, my mother's confused concern, my father's mild irritation at having his dinner disrupted, and Diego's genuine bewilderment at my reaction. They had no idea that they had just delivered the most crushing assessment of my worth that I had ever experienced. "Thank you all for the career advice," I said, my voice still carefully controlled. "I'll be sure to keep your suggestions in mind. While I'm working with some of the most accomplished scientists in the world on research that could potentially change how we understand molecular physics, I'm sure they'll be very interested to know that you think I should consider teaching high school instead." I left the dining room before anyone could respond, but I heard Rebecca's nervous laugh and my mother's whispered apology for my mood. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I could hear them resuming their conversation about Diego's fall semester plans, my outburst already forgotten in favor of more important topics. That night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, I made a promise to myself that would define every decision I made for the next 8 years. I would not just succeed, I would succeed so spectacularly, so undeniably, that even they would be forced to recognize the magnitude of their miscalculation. I would achieve something so significant that teaching high school would seem laughable. In comparison, I just had no idea then that the opportunity to fulfill that promise would come in the most public, most perfect way imaginable, at Diego's own graduation ceremony, in front of thousands of people, including every person who had ever underestimated me. The Los Alamos internship changed everything, though not in the way I had expected. Walking into the research facility on my first day, I felt like I was entering a different universe, one where intellectual curiosity was the primary currency and breakthrough discoveries were the ultimate goal. For 10 weeks, I worked alongside scientists who treated complex problems like exciting puzzles rather than impossible obstacles. My assigned mentor was Dr. Maria Santos, a computational physicist who had spent the previous decade developing algorithms for predicting molecular behavior under extreme conditions. She was in her late 30s with an intensity that reminded me of Mrs. Brennan, but amplified by the weight of working on projects with national security implications. "Isabella," she said during our first meeting, studying my application materials. Spread across her desk, "Your high school research on polymer synthesis shows remarkable sophistication. But here, we're going to push you far beyond what you thought was possible." The project she assigned me involved developing predictive models for how certain materials would behave under cybernetic scenarios, essentially using computational chemistry to understand how digital intrusions could affect physical infrastructure. It was exactly the kind of interdisciplinary challenge that excited me most, combining pure science with real-world applications that could protect people. For the first month, I struggled with concepts that were several years beyond my academic level. Dr. Santos expected me to understand quantum mechanics principles that weren't typically taught until graduate school, and to apply them using programming languages I had never encountered. Most nights, I stayed in the dormitory until midnight, working through mathematical proofs and debugging code that seemed to mock my efforts. But gradually, something clicked. The patterns I had always seen in chemistry began extending into computational modeling. The logical frameworks that made molecular interactions predictable also governed how digital systems could be manipulated and protected. By the end of my second month, I wasn't just keeping up with the research, I was contributing original insights that impressed even Dr. Santos. "You have an unusual gift," she told me during one of our weekly check-ins. "Most students your age can either understand the theoretical framework or handle the computational implementation, but rarely both. You're seeing connections that some of my graduate students miss." The validation felt intoxicating after years of being told my interests were too abstract or impractical. Here were people who understood that theoretical knowledge could have concrete applications, that solving complex problems required exactly the kind of analytical thinking my family had always treated as a limitation rather than a strength. During my final week at Los Alamos, Dr. Santos called me into her office for what I assumed would be a routine end-of-internship evaluation. Instead, she presented me with an opportunity that would fundamentally alter my trajectory. "Isabella, I've been approached by colleagues at the Department of Homeland Security who are developing a new cybersecurity initiative. They're looking for researchers who can bridge the gap between digital vulnerabilities and physical consequences. Your work this summer has convinced me that you're exactly what they need." She explained that the position would be contingent on completing my undergraduate degree, but that they were prepared to offer me a full scholarship to any university I chose, along with guaranteed employment upon graduation. The work would be classified, meaning I couldn't discuss the details with anyone, but it would involve protecting critical infrastructure from sophisticated cyber threats. "This is the kind of opportunity that comes along once in a decade," Dr. Santos continued. "You would be working on projects that could literally save lives. Are you interested? I was more than interested, I was electrified. This was exactly the kind of meaningful work I had always envisioned for myself, combining scientific rigor with real-world impact. But as I sat there absorbing the magnitude of what she was offering, I realized something that made the opportunity even more precious. My family would never understand its significance. They would know I had some government job involving computers and science, but the classified nature of the work meant they would never comprehend that I was helping to protect the country from sophisticated attacks. They would assume I had found a stable but unremarkable career, exactly the kind of practical path they had always envisioned for me. The irony was perfect. While they celebrated Diego's visible achievements, his internships at prestigious firms, his networking events, his engagement to Rebecca, I would be quietly becoming exactly the kind of person they claimed to value, someone making a real difference in the world, just in ways they couldn't see or understand. I accepted Dr. Santos's offer immediately. Returning home from Los Alamos, I found my family eager to hear about my summer camp experience. Over dinner, I described the research in general terms, mentioning computational modeling and molecular physics, but avoiding any specifics that might reveal the true scope of what I had been working on. That sounds very educational, sweetheart, my mother said with the same tone she might use to praise a child's finger painting. I'm sure it will look nice on your college applications. Diego, who had spent his summer interning at a Phoenix investment firm, was more engaged. Did you get to use any cool equipment? Rebecca's cousin did some kind of research program at ASU, and she said the labs there were pretty impressive. I described some of the computational resources I had access to, but I could see his attention drifting when I mentioned quantum calculations and algorithm development. These concepts were as foreign to him as ancient Greek, interesting in theory, but irrelevant to anything he considered important. Well, my father concluded, it sounds like you learned some valuable skills. That should help you find a good job after college. The assumption that my summer had been about job training rather than contributing to cutting-edge research that could reshape national security policy revealed how completely they misunderstood what I was capable of achieving. But I no longer felt frustrated by their inability to comprehend my potential. Instead, I felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that their ignorance would make my eventual vindication even more dramatic. Senior year of high school proceeded exactly as I had planned. With the scholarship offer from the Department of Homeland Security secured, I no longer felt pressure to impress college admissions committees. I chose Arizona State University's honors program, knowing that my path to meaningful work was already guaranteed, regardless of where I earned my degree. My parents were pleased with my practical choice. ASU was an excellent school with reasonable tuition costs, and staying in Arizona meant I could visit home regularly. They assumed I was being sensible and modest in my ambitions, which suited my purposes perfectly. Diego, meanwhile, was thriving in his sophomore year at Columbia. His stories from New York grew more impressive with each phone call home. Networking events with Fortune 500 executives, spring break trips to exclusive resorts, internship opportunities that would position him for rapid advancement in the financial industry. Rebecca had transferred to Columbia for her junior year, and their relationship was proceeding exactly as my parents had hoped. They talked about marriage as a foregone conclusion, speculating about wedding venues and future grandchildren with the kind of detailed enthusiasm they had never shown for any of my achievements. They'll have such beautiful, successful children. My mother would sigh contentedly after Diego's weekly phone calls. And Rebecca comes from such a good family. Her father has already offered Diego a position at one of his dealerships after graduation. The contrast between their excitement about Diego's conventional path to success and their indifference to my unconventional achievements no longer bothered me. I was playing a longer game now, one where the final reveal would be worth years. of being underestimated that my undergraduate years at ASU were simultaneously the most challenging and most rewarding of my life. The honors program provided access to advanced coursework and research opportunities that kept me intellectually engaged, while my prearranged career path allowed me to focus on learning rather than resume building. I double majored in computer science and mathematics, graduating summa cum laude in 3 years instead of 4. My thesis project involved developing new approaches to predictive cybersecurity modeling, work that built directly on what I had learned at Los Alamos. My faculty advisor, Dr. Jennifer Chun, was amazed by the sophistication of my research. "Isabella, this work is graduate-level quality," she told me as we reviewed my final thesis draft. "Have you considered pursuing a PhD? With research like this, you could have your pick of programs." I explained that I had already accepted a position with the federal government. Though I couldn't provide details about the specific nature of the work, Dr. Chun nodded knowingly. She had enough experience with government research to understand the implications of classified employment. "Well, they're getting someone exceptional," she said. "Your ability to see patterns and develop innovative solutions is truly remarkable. Whatever you're going to be working on, I'm confident you'll make significant contributions." Moving to Washington, D.C. after graduation felt like stepping into my true life for the first time. The work with the Department of Homeland Security was everything Dr. Santos had promised and more. I was part of a team developing next-generation cybersecurity protocols, using advanced algorithms to predict and prevent attacks on critical infrastructure. The classified nature of the work meant I couldn't share details with anyone, including my family. When they asked about my job, I provided vague descriptions about computer analysis and data modeling. They assumed I was doing routine government work analyzing spreadsheets and generating reports, which suited my purposes perfectly. Meanwhile, Diego was launching his career in Manhattan with exactly the kind of fanfare my family loved. He joined Rebecca's father's automotive empire as a regional sales manager, a position that came with a generous salary, comprehensive benefits, and immediate access to the wealthy social circles that my parents found so impressive. Their engagement was announced in the society pages of both Phoenix and New York newspapers, complete with professional photographs and detailed descriptions of Rebecca's designer ring. My parents hosted an engagement party at the Arizona Country Club, inviting everyone they had ever wanted to impress and basking in the reflected glory of their son's advantageous match. I attended the party during one of my rare visits home, watching my parents beam with pride as they introduced Diego and Rebecca to business associates and family friends. The conversation invariably focused on Diego's promising career prospects and Rebecca's impeccable family connections. When people asked about me, my parents would mention that I was doing well in Washington and working with computers. Lack of detail in these descriptions made it clear that they viewed my career as stable, but unremarkable, exactly what I needed them to think. But while Diego was building his reputation through visible achievements and social connections, I was quietly developing expertise that would prove far more significant than anyone imagined. The algorithm I had been working on for the past 2 years was showing remarkable success in predicting cyber attacks before they occurred, potentially saving millions of dollars in preventing damage and countless lives protected from infrastructure failures. My work caught the attention of Dr. Richard Sterling, the Director of Cybersecurity Innovation at Columbia University School of Engineering. Columbia had been contracted by the federal government to develop advanced threat assessment protocols, and my algorithm was being considered for integration into their research framework. Dr. Sterling requested a meeting to discuss potential collaboration between the Department of Homeland Security and Columbia's cybersecurity program. When he learned that I had developed the core algorithm independently, he was astounded. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said during our first video conference, This work represents a paradigm shift in how we approach cybersecurity. The predictive accuracy of your model exceeds anything we've seen in academic or commercial settings. Would you be interested in presenting your research at our annual Cybersecurity Symposium? The symposium was scheduled for May, just weeks before Columbia's graduate school commencement ceremony. Dr. Sterling explained, would bring together the world's leading cybersecurity experts, government officials, and academic researchers. My presentation would be the keynote address, highlighting breakthrough innovations in the field. This would be significant professional recognition, he emphasized. The symposium is covered by major media outlets, and your work would likely be featured in academic journals and industry publications. Are you prepared for that level of visibility? I was more than prepared, I was exhilarated. After years of working in classified anonymity, the opportunity to receive public recognition for my contributions felt like a dream come true. But even more exciting was the timing. The symposium was scheduled for the same weekend as Diego's MBA graduation from Columbia. The symmetry was too perfect to be coincidental. While my family celebrated Diego's conventional achievement, I would be standing on the same campus, receiving recognition as one of the most innovative cybersecurity researchers in the country. The irony was delicious. They would finally learn what I had actually accomplished, not through my own announcement, but through the most public, most unassailable validation possible. I accepted Dr. Sterling's invitation immediately, then began planning how to ensure my family would be in the audience to witness my moment of vindication. The plan that emerged was elegant in its simplicity. I would attend Diego's graduation as the supportive sister they expected me to be, knowing that in a few short hours, their understanding of my worth would be forever transformed. For the first time in my life, I looked forward to a family gathering, not despite their low expectations, but because of them. The bigger the gap between their assumptions and reality, the more devastating the revelation would be. The stage was set for the most satisfying moment of my entire life. The morning of Diego's graduation dawned crisp and clear in Manhattan. Kind of perfect May Day that made Columbia's campus look like something from a postcard. I stood in my hotel room, adjusting the navy blazer I had chosen specifically for this moment, professional enough to command respect when I took the stage at the Cybersecurity Symposium, but understated enough that my family wouldn't suspect anything unusual about my appearance. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Can't wait to see you at the ceremony. So proud of both our graduates today. The word both made me smile. She had no idea how prophetic that message would prove to be. I arrived at the campus early, ostensibly to secure good seats for Diego's ceremony, but actually to complete my final preparations for the symposium. Dr. Sterling had arranged for me to review the presentation setup in the engineering building's main auditorium, the same venue where I would deliver my keynote address in just a few hours. Ms. Rodriguez, he greeted me as I entered the auditorium. I must say, I'm impressed by your composure. Most researchers would be nervous about presenting to an audience of this caliber. I looked out at the empty seats that would soon hold the world's leading cybersecurity experts, government officials, and media representatives. Dr. Sterling, I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. I'm not nervous, I'm ready. He smiled knowingly. That confidence will serve you well. Your research deserves recognition at the highest levels, and today you'll receive it. After confirming that all technical aspects were in order, I made my way to the main campus quad, where families were already gathering for the business school graduation ceremony. The scene was exactly what I had expected. Proud parents in their finest clothes, graduates in caps and gowns posing for photographs, and an atmosphere of celebration that reminded me of every family gathering where Diego had been the center of attention. I spotted my family near the entrance to the ceremony venue. My parents looked distinguished and proud. My father in his best suit and my mother wearing a new dress I'd never seen before. Diego stood between them in his graduation regalia, beaming with the easy confidence that had carried him through every milestone of his life. "Isabella," my mother called out when she saw me approaching. "You look lovely, sweetheart. We're so excited you could be here for this special day." My father shook my hand with the formal warmth he reserved for family occasions. "Good to see you, honey. Diego's been looking forward to having his sister here to celebrate." Diego hugged me genuinely, and for a moment I felt a pang of something that might have been guilt. He had never been cruel to me intentionally. His privilege had simply been so natural that he'd never questioned it. But then I remembered the dinner conversation about my Los Alamos internship, his casual dismissal of my potential, and the feeling passed. "Congratulations," I told him sincerely. "An MBA from Columbia is quite an achievement." "Thanks, Izzy," he replied, using the childhood nickname that somehow made me feel both younger and more determined. "It's been a lot of work, but worth it. Rebecca's family is throwing a celebration dinner tonight at this amazing restaurant in Soho. You'll love it." As we made our way into the ceremony venue, I listened to my parents discuss Diego's future with the kind of detailed enthusiasm I remembered from every major moment of his life. Rebecca's father had already confirmed Diego's promotion to regional director, complete with a substantial salary increase and stock options. They were planning to buy an apartment on the Upper East Side and start thinking seriously about marriage. "He's really made something of himself," my father said with unmistakable pride. "All that investment in his education has paid off exactly as we hoped." The ceremony began with the typical pomp and circumstance of academic tradition. Dean Margaret Williams delivered opening remarks about the exceptional class of graduates and their potential to shape the business world. Various awards were presented to students who had distinguished themselves in different areas: academic excellence, leadership, community service. Diego's name was called during the general conferral of degrees, and I applauded along with my family as he walked across the stage to receive his diploma. My parents beamed with pride, my mother wiping away tears as she recorded the moment on her phone. "Our son, the Columbia graduate," my father whispered, his voice thick with emotion. After the ceremony concluded, we gathered outside for the obligatory family photographs. My parents posed with Diego in every conceivable configuration, documenting the moment from multiple angles. Other families around us were engaged in similar rituals, creating lasting memories of their children's achievements. As we prepared to leave for lunch, my phone rang. Dr. Sterling's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my heart rate accelerate slightly. "I need to take this," I told my family, stepping a few feet away. "Work call." "Isabella." Dr. Sterling's voice was urgent but excited. "We've had some last-minute changes to the symposium program. The Secretary of Homeland Security has decided to attend your presentation, along with several members of Congress who are interested in cybersecurity legislation. The media presence has also expanded significantly. We're expecting coverage from major networks and technology publications." The magnitude of what he was describing hit me immediately. This wasn't just academic recognition anymore. It was national visibility for work that could genuinely change how the country approached cybersecurity threats. "Are you ready for this level of attention?" he asked. "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "When do you need me there?" "The presentation begins at 3 p.m., but I'd like you here by 2:30 for final preparations. Can you manage that timing?" I glanced at my family, who were still organizing themselves for photographs and discussing lunch plans. "I'll be there." As I hung up, my mother approached with a concerned expression. "Everything all right, sweetheart? You look a bit tense." "Just some work issues I need to handle," I replied, maintaining the same vague tone I'd used for years when discussing my career. "Actually, I'm going to need to step away for a few hours this afternoon. There's a meeting I can't miss." My father frowned slightly. "Today? On the weekend?" What kind of meeting requires you to work on a Saturday? Government work doesn't follow normal schedules, I explained, which was true enough. I should be back in time for dinner tonight. Diego looked disappointed. Are you sure you can't postpone it? We were hoping to spend the whole day celebrating together. For a moment, I considered telling them the truth that in 2 hours, I would be presenting groundbreaking research to some of the most powerful people in government and academia. But the surprise would be so much more effective if they discovered it on their own. I wish I could, I said apologetically, but this really can't be rescheduled. My mother patted my arm sympathetically. That's all right, honey. We understand that your job is important too. We'll just have to celebrate extra hard when you get back. The casual way she said, your job is important too, as if my career was a minor consideration compared to Diego's big day, only strengthened my resolve. In less than 3 hours, they would understand exactly how wrong they had been about the relative importance of our respective achievements. We had lunch at a restaurant near campus, where the conversation focused entirely on Diego's future plans and the networking opportunities he had cultivated during his MBA program. I participated when appropriate, but found myself mentally rehearsing key points from my presentation, anticipating the questions I might receive from the distinguished audience. At 2:15, I excused myself from the table, claiming I needed to prepare for my work meeting. My family barely looked up from their animated discussion about Diego's job prospects, waving casual goodbyes as I left to handle some boring government business. Walking across campus toward the engineering building, I felt a surreal sense of calm. After years of being dismissed and underestimated, after countless moments of watching my family celebrate achievements far less significant than what I had accomplished in classified silence, I was finally about to step into the spotlight I had earned. The auditorium was filling rapidly when I arrived. I recognized several faces from cybersecurity conferences and academic publications, people whose work I had studied and admired for years. Dr. Sterling introduced me to government officials, university administrators, and journalists who would be covering the event. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sterling announced as the presentation began, it is my honor to introduce Isabella Rodriguez, whose innovative research has revolutionized our understanding of predictive cybersecurity modeling. As I walked to the podium, I caught sight of my family through the large windows overlooking the quad. They were still at lunch, completely unaware that their nobody daughter was about to address an audience that included some of the most influential people in national security. Distinguished guests, I began, my voice clear and confident. What I'm about to share with you represents a fundamental breakthrough in our ability to protect critical infrastructure from sophisticated cyber threats. For the next 45 minutes, I presented research that had taken years to develop, explaining how my algorithm could predict cyber attacks with unprecedented accuracy and prevent catastrophic failures of essential systems. The audience was captivated, asking probing questions that demonstrated their understanding of the work's significance. When I finished, the applause was immediate and sustained. Dr. Sterling returned to the podium with an expression of unmistakable pride. Ms. Rodriguez's work represents exactly the kind of innovation that will define the next generation of cybersecurity protection, he announced. I'm pleased to inform you that Columbia University will be establishing the Rodriguez Center for Predictive Cybersecurity, with Ms. Rodriguez serving as its founding director. The announcement was completely unexpected. Dr. Sterling hadn't mentioned anything about a research center bearing my name. As the audience erupted in applause again, I realized that my moment of vindication had exceeded even my most ambitious expectations. But the best part was yet to come. As I left the stage and began fielding congratulations from audience members, my phone buzzed with a text from Diego. Where are you? We're heading back to campus for some photos, and we want you in them. I smiled as I typed my response. Actually, I'm already on campus. Look for me in the engineering building. What my family would find when they came looking for me would change everything they thought they knew about their practical daughter and her boring government job. The moment I had been building toward for 8 years was finally about to arrive. 20 minutes after my presentation ended, I was still in the engineering building's main lobby, surrounded by government officials and university administrators who wanted to discuss the implications of my research. Dr. Sterling was coordinating interviews with journalists from the Wall Street Journal and Technology Review, while representatives from the Department of Homeland Security were scheduling follow-up meetings about expanding the research program. That's when I saw my family through the building's glass doors. My mother was leading the group, looking slightly confused as she checked the building directory. My father walked beside her with his usual purposeful stride, while Diego trailed behind, texting on his phone. They were clearly looking for someone, me, but had no idea what they were about to discover. "Excuse me for just a moment," I told Dr. Sterling, who was deep in conversation with a CNN technology correspondent. "My family has arrived." He glanced toward the entrance and smiled knowingly. Ah, the moment of truth. "Would you like me to handle the introductions?" "That won't be necessary," I replied, savoring the anticipation. "I think this revelation will be more effective coming from them." I watched through the glass as my mother approached the security desk, speaking to the guard who was manning the visitor check-in station. Even from across the lobby, I could see her pointing toward the upper floors, clearly asking about someone, probably requesting directions to find wherever I was supposed to be having my mysterious work meeting. The security guard consulted his computer screen, his expression shifting from routine helpfulness to something approaching surprise. He made a phone call, spoke briefly, then gestured toward the main auditorium area where I was standing. My mother nodded and thanked him, but I could see confusion creeping across her face as she rejoined my father and Diego. They walked through the doors into the lobby, and immediately their expressions changed as they took in the scene around them. The engineering building's main floor was buzzing with activity that was clearly significant: television cameras, people in expensive suits speaking intensely into phones, university officials with name tags indicating important titles, and security personnel managing what was obviously a high-profile event. My father's business instincts kicked in immediately. He began scanning the crowd with the analytical expression he used when trying to understand the power dynamics in any room. My mother looked simply bewildered, while Diego had stopped texting and was staring at the obvious signs that something important was happening in a building where his sister supposedly had a routine work meeting. That's when my mother spotted me across the lobby, standing in the center of a group that included people she couldn't identify but who were obviously important based on their demeanor and the difference being shown to them by university staff. "There she is," she said, pointing in my direction. "But who are all those people she's talking to?" They began walking toward me, and I could see the exact moment when they started recognizing faces from news programs and government websites. My father's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching alarm as he realized that his daughter wasn't attending a boring bureaucratic meeting but was clearly the center of attention at what appeared to be a major event. Dr. Sterling noticed my family approaching and stepped forward to intercept them with the kind of smooth professionalism that came from years of managing high-stakes academic politics. "You must be Isabella's family," he said warmly, extending his hand to my father. "Dr. Richard Sterling, Director of Cybersecurity Innovation at Columbia University. We're absolutely thrilled to be working with your daughter." My father shook his hand automatically, but I could see him struggling to process what he was hearing. "I'm sorry, working with Isabella? I thought she was here for some kind of government meeting." Dr. Sterling's smile widened. "Oh, she was indeed here for government business, presenting her groundbreaking cybersecurity research to the Secretary of Homeland Security and members of Congress. Quite an impressive turnout for her work." The silence that followed was the most satisfying moment of my entire life. I watched my family's faces cycle through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, dawning comprehension, and finally something approaching shock as the implications of what they were hearing began to register. My mother was the first to find her voice. "I'm sorry, presenting research? Isabella, what is he talking about?" Before I could answer, one of the CNN journalists approached our group with a camera operator in tow. "Ms. Rodriguez, we're ready for that interview whenever you are." The story about the Rodriguez Center is going to be our lead technology segment tomorrow. The mention of my name in connection with a research center apparently broke something loose in Diego's brain. "Wait," he said, his voice rising slightly. "The Rodriguez Center? Named after Isabella?" Dr. Sterling nodded enthusiastically. "Columbia is establishing the Rodriguez Center for Predictive Cybersecurity with your daughter as the founding director. Her algorithm represents the most significant advancement in cyber threat prediction we've seen in decades. The potential applications for protecting critical infrastructure are extraordinary." I could practically see my father's mind working, trying to reconcile this information with years of assumptions about my quiet government job analyzing spreadsheets. "Isabella," he said slowly, "what exactly do you do for work?" "I develop algorithms that predict and prevent cyber attacks on critical infrastructure," I replied matter-of-factly. "Power grids, financial systems, transportation networks, essentially anything that could cause massive damage if compromised by foreign adversaries or terrorist organizations." My mother's hand went to her throat in a gesture I recognized from moments of extreme surprise. "But you always said you worked with computers and data. You made it sound so routine?" I suggested. "Boring?" "Yes, I know. The work is classified, so I couldn't provide details about what I actually do. But I've been protecting national security for the past 5 years, while you've been assuming I analyze mundane government reports." The CNN journalist was growing impatient, clearly wanting to proceed with the interview that would introduce my research to a national audience. "Ms. Rodriguez, should we postpone this conversation with your family?" "Actually," I said, making a decision that felt both spontaneous and inevitable, "would it be possible to include my family in the segment? I think it would be interesting to get their perspective on discovering that their daughter's work has national significance." The journalist's eyes lit up immediately. Human interest angles always made technical stories more compelling, and the family discovers daughter's secret achievements narrative was perfect for their purposes. "Absolutely," she replied. "If your family is comfortable being on camera, that would add a wonderful dimension to the story." I looked at my parents and Diego, who were still processing the fundamental shift in their understanding of who I was and what I had accomplished. "Are you willing to be interviewed about your reaction to learning about my work?" My father, who had spent his entire career navigating complex professional situations, was the first to recover his composure. "Of course," he said, though I could hear the strain beneath his practiced calm. "We're very proud of Isabella's achievements." The interview that followed was surreal in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The journalist asked my family about their awareness of my research, their reactions to learning about the Rodriguez Center, and their thoughts on having a daughter who was being recognized as one of the country's leading cybersecurity experts. My parents handled the questions with the diplomatic skill that came from years of social and professional networking, expressing pride and support while carefully avoiding any mention of the fact that they had been completely unaware of the significance of my work. Diego was more candid, admitting that he had always known Isabella was brilliant, but hadn't realized the scope of her professional accomplishments. When the journalist asked me about the support I had received from my family during my career development, I chose my words carefully. "My family taught me the importance of perseverance and self-reliance," I said, which was technically true even if the lessons hadn't been intentional. They've always encouraged me to pursue my goals independently. After the interview concluded, we found ourselves standing in the lobby as the crowd of officials and media representatives gradually dispersed. The energy of the day's events was slowly dissipating, leaving my family and me to confront the new reality that my revelation had created. "Isabella," my mother said quietly, "I feel like we owe you an apology." "For what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "For not understanding," my father replied. "For not recognizing what you were capable of achieving. For treating your work like it was less significant than Diego's career." The apology felt both necessary and insufficient. Years of dismissal and low expectations couldn't be erased by a single moment of recognition. But I could see that the revelation had genuinely shaken their fundamental assumptions about my worth and potential. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But I need you to understand that the problem wasn't just that you didn't know about my specific achievements. The problem was that you never believed I was capable of extraordinary things in the first place." Diego stepped forward, looking more serious than I had seen him since childhood. "Isabella, I need to say something. I've always known you were smarter than me, probably smarter than anyone in our family. But I got so used to being the one everyone celebrated that I never really thought about what it must have felt like for you to be overlooked." His honesty was unexpected and surprisingly moving. "Thank you for saying that. The thing is," he continued, "I've been thinking about that dinner conversation before you left for Los Alamos, when we all basically dismissed your internship and talked about you becoming a teacher. I knew it was wrong when it happened, but I didn't speak up because it was easier to let everyone focus on my stuff instead of dealing with uncomfortable truths." My mother was crying now, not the happy tears of celebration, but the painful tears of recognition. "We failed you, didn't we? All those years, we made you feel like your achievements didn't matter because they were different from what we understood or valued." "Yes," I said simply, "you did fail me. But I succeeded anyway, which is something I'm proud of regardless of whether you understand it now." My father, who rarely showed emotional vulnerability, seemed to be struggling with concepts that challenged his worldview. "Isabella, how do we fix this? How do we rebuild a relationship when we've been so wrong about something so fundamental?" It was a fair question, and one I had been considering during the years when I was building my career in preparation for exactly this moment. We start by acknowledging what happened without trying to minimize it or explain it away. We continue by recognizing that I built my success without your support, which means I don't need your validation to feel valuable. And if you want to be part of my life going forward, it has to be because you genuinely value who I am, not because you're impressed by my achievements. The conversation continued for another hour as we walked through Manhattan toward the restaurant, where Rebecca's family was hosting Diego's celebration dinner. By the time we arrived, my family had begun the difficult process of reconciling their memories with the new information about my capabilities and accomplishments. The dinner was awkward in ways that were both predictable and revelatory. Rebecca's parents, who had always treated me with polite indifference, suddenly wanted to discuss my research and ask detailed questions about my career prospects. Other guests at the dinner had seen news coverage of the Columbia cybersecurity announcement and were curious about my work. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention at a family gathering, but the experience felt hollow rather than satisfying. I had spent years imagining this moment of recognition, but actually living it made me realize that external validation had never been the real goal. What I had wanted was respect and understanding from people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, not admiration from people who only cared about impressive achievements. The months that followed brought fundamental changes to my family relationships, though not always in the ways I had expected. My parents made genuine efforts to understand my work and support my career, but there was an awkwardness to their newfound interest that reminded me constantly of how different things might have been if they had believed in me from the beginning. Diego and I grew closer as adults than we had ever been as children. His willingness to acknowledge his privilege and my marginalization created space for honest conversations about our shared history. Rebecca, surprisingly, became one of my strongest advocates, perhaps because she understood what it felt like to be evaluated, primarily on the basis of other people's expectations. The Rodriguez Center for Predictive Cybersecurity became everything Dr. Sterling had promised and more. Within 2 years, our research had prevented dozens of potential attacks on critical infrastructure, and our algorithms were being implemented by security agencies around the world. The work was intellectually challenging, socially meaningful, and professionally rewarding in ways that exceeded my most ambitious dreams. But perhaps the most important lesson from this entire experience had nothing to do with career success or family vindication. What I learned was that the most powerful response to people who don't believe in you isn't anger or resentment. It's quiet, consistent excellence that eventually speaks so loudly they have no choice but to hear it. If you're watching this and feeling undervalued or dismissed by people who should support you, remember that their inability to see your potential says nothing about what you're actually capable of achieving. Use their doubt as fuel for your determination, but don't make their eventual recognition the measure of your success. The most meaningful validation is the kind you give yourself through perseverance, integrity, and unwavering commitment to your own potential. Everything else is just noise. My family calls me regularly now, asking about my research and expressing pride in my accomplishments. But the relationship that matters most is the one I've built with myself, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing I can achieve extraordinary things regardless of whether anyone else believes in me. That confidence, more than any external recognition, is the foundation for whatever comes next. And based on the research we're currently developing at the Rodriguez Center, what comes next is going to be remarkable. 3 years have passed since that transformative day at Columbia, and the ripple effects continue to reshape not just my life, but the lives of everyone around me. The Rodriguez Center has expanded into a multi-million-dollar research facility with 43 full-time researchers and partnerships with universities across 3 continents. Our algorithms now protect infrastructure in 17 countries. And last month I was invited to brief the United Nations Security Council on emerging cyber threats. But success at this level brings complexities I never anticipated. The visibility that once felt like vindication now sometimes feels like a burden. Every decision I make is scrutinized by media outlets, academic peers, and government officials who want to understand how a relatively young researcher achieved such rapid prominence in a field traditionally dominated by older, more established experts. The speaking engagements alone have become a full-time responsibility. Last year one delivered keynote addresses at cybersecurity conferences in London, Tokyo, and Tel Aviv, sharing insights about predictive algorithms while carefully navigating the classified aspects of my work. Each presentation reinforces my reputation as a thought leader in the field, but they also serve as constant reminders of how far I've traveled from the quiet teenager who once hid her academic achievements to avoid family discomfort. My relationship with Diego has evolved into something I never expected: genuine friendship built on mutual respect rather than family obligation. He left Rebecca's father's automotive business 18 months ago to start his own consulting firm focused on helping traditional businesses adapt to digital transformation challenges. The irony isn't lost on either of us that his most successful venture draws heavily on cybersecurity principles I've helped develop. "You know what's funny?" he said during our most recent phone conversation. "For years I thought success meant following a predictable path: good grades, prestigious university, well-connected job, advantageous marriage. But watching you build something completely original has made me realize that real achievement comes from creating value that didn't exist before." His consulting firm has grown rapidly, not because of family connections or inherited advantages, but because he's genuinely good at helping business leaders understand complex technical concepts. The confidence that once manifested as effortless charm has transformed into substantive expertise, earned through dedicated study and practical application. Rebecca, surprisingly, has become one of my closest friends. Her perspective as someone who grew up with advantages similar to Diego's, but chose to use them thoughtfully, has provided insights I never expected. She left her father's business to pursue a master's degree in public policy, focusing specifically on technology regulation and digital privacy rights. Watching your family realize they had completely misjudged your potential was a wake-up call for me too. She confided during a visit to Washington last spring. I started questioning all the assumptions I'd made about success and worth, based on visibility rather than substance. My parents have struggled more than anyone else with the long-term implications of their revelation about my capabilities. The guilt they felt initially has evolved into a more complex mixture of pride, regret, and uncertainty about how to relate to a daughter whose professional life they still don't fully understand. My mother has thrown herself into learning about cybersecurity and technology policy, reading articles and attending local lectures with the dedication of someone trying to master a foreign language. Her efforts are touching but sometimes painful to witness, as if she's trying to retroactively become the supportive parent she wishes she had been during my formative years. I subscribe to 3 technology journals, she told me during our last visit to Phoenix, gesturing toward a stack of publications on her coffee table. I still don't understand everything, but I want to be able to have intelligent conversations with you about your work. My father's response has been more complicated. His business background gives him a framework for understanding the commercial implications of my research, but he struggles with the reality that his daughter has achieved a level of professional recognition that exceeds his own accomplishments. The man who once dismissed my potential as impractical now finds himself boasting about my achievements to business associates, a transformation that feels both gratifying and hollow. The most unexpected development has been the emergence of my work as a case study in academic and professional development programs. Business schools now use my career trajectory to illustrate principles of innovation and perseverance, while psychology departments examine my family dynamics as an example of how expectations can limit or liberate potential. Dr. Amanda Peterson, my former professor at ASU who first recognized my research capabilities, contacted me last year about developing a mentorship program for students from families that don't understand or support academic achievement in technical fields. Your story has inspired dozens of students who thought they had to choose between family acceptance and intellectual fulfillment, she explained during our video conference. They need to see that it's possible to pursue extraordinary goals, even when the people closest to you can't envision your success. The mentorship program has become one of my most rewarding professional activities. Working with undergraduate researchers who face similar challenges to those I experienced provides perspective on how family dynamics can either nurture or constrain individual potential. Many of these students come from backgrounds where technical careers are viewed with suspicion or misunderstanding, and they need guidance on navigating the emotional complexities of pursuing paths their families cannot fully appreciate. Sarah, a sophomore computer science major from rural Montana, reminds me particularly of my younger self. Her parents are ranchers who view her interest in artificial intelligence research as an impractical diversion from more concrete forms of work. During our monthly video calls, I help her develop strategies for maintaining family relationships while pursuing academic goals that feel foreign to her cultural background. My dad keeps asking when I'm going to get serious about my future, she told me during our most recent conversation. He thinks computer programming is a hobby, not a career. How do I make him understand that this work could change how we approach agricultural efficiency and environmental sustainability? These conversations remind me that my experience, while extreme in its ultimate vindication, represents patterns that affect countless students whose families struggle to understand or value intellectual achievement in technical fields. The work I do with these mentees has taught me that successful navigation of family expectations requires both emotional resilience and strategic communication skills that aren't typically taught in academic programs, but are essential for students from non-traditional backgrounds. The international recognition of my research has also created opportunities to address these issues on a broader scale. When the World Economic Forum invited me to speak about innovation and human capital development, I used the platform to discuss how family and cultural expectations can either accelerate or constrain technological advancement. The most brilliant minds don't always emerge from families that understand brilliance, I told the audience of global leaders and policymakers. Our collective ability to solve complex challenges depends on recognizing and nurturing talent, regardless of its social or cultural packaging. That presentation led to consulting opportunities with governments interested in developing more inclusive approaches to identifying and supporting technical talent. The European Union has retained the Rodriguez Center to evaluate their STEM education initiatives, while several African nations have requested guidance on creating pathways for students whose traditional communities may not fully appreciate technological careers. But perhaps the most profound change has been in how I understand the relationship between individual achievement and family dynamics. The anger and resentment that fueled my determination for so many years has gradually transformed into something more complex, a recognition that my parents' limitations were products of their own experiences and expectations rather than deliberate cruelty. This shift in perspective became clear during a family dinner last Christmas, when my father made an observation that surprised everyone at the table. "You know, Isabella, I've been thinking about something," he said as we finished my mother's traditional tamales. "When you were growing up, I kept trying to push you toward what I thought was practical, because I was afraid your intelligence would lead you into isolation or disappointment. I thought if you aimed too high, you'd be hurt when the world didn't recognize your value." He paused, looking around the table at Diego, Rebecca, and my mother before continuing. "What I realize now is that I was projecting my own fears about taking risks and pursuing ambitious goals. I limited your potential because I was afraid of my own limitations." The conversation that followed was the most honest discussion our family had ever had about expectations, fear, and the ways that love can sometimes manifest as limitation rather than liberation. My mother acknowledged that her focus on Diego's social success reflected her own insecurities about fitting into their affluent community, while Diego admitted that he had often felt pressure to justify the advantages he'd been given. "The truth is," Diego said, "I always knew Isabella was more talented than me, but I was afraid that if everyone else realized it too, I'd lose my identity as the accomplished one in the family." These revelations didn't erase the pain of years of dismissal and low expectations, but they provided context that made forgiveness possible. Understanding the psychological mechanisms behind my family's behavior allowed me to separate their actions from my sense of self-worth, creating space for relationships based on present reality rather than past hurts. The professional trajectory that began with that moment of vindication at Columbia has continued to exceed even my most ambitious projections. Next month, I'll be announcing the Rodriguez Center's latest breakthrough, a predictive algorithm that can identify cyber threats up to 6 months before they're executed, potentially preventing attacks on a scale we've never seen before. The work continues to be classified in its specifics, but the general implications are significant enough that major news outlets are already preparing feature stories about how artificial intelligence and cybersecurity are converging to create new forms of national defense. More importantly, the research has attracted a new generation of brilliant young scientists who want to contribute to work that has clear social value. The Rodriguez Center now employs researchers from 15 countries creating an intellectual community focused on problems that matter beyond academic recognition or commercial profit. But success at this level also requires constant vigilance against the temptation to define myself solely through professional achievements. The girl who once craved recognition from her family has become a woman who must resist the equally dangerous trap of deriving all sense of worth from external validation, even when that validation comes from the most prestigious sources imaginable. This balance has become particularly important as I've begun receiving offers that would elevate my profile, even further cabinet-level appointments, corporate board positions, speaking arrangements that would make me a recognizable public figure, rather than a behind-the-scenes researcher. Each opportunity requires careful consideration of whether it advances meaningful work, simply feeds an ego that was once starved for attention. The girl who was once called a nobody at her brother's graduation has become exactly who she was, always meant to be. And that transformation happened not because her family finally saw her worth, but because she never stopped believing in it herself. But more than that, she learned that the most powerful response to being underestimated isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right. The difference matters more than anyone who hasn't lived it could possibly understand. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.